Okay, so very warm welcome to everybody joining this webinar on Discover Your Strengths. I can see a few people joining, about 60 plus people joining, so welcome. I will share a bit of an introduction as we get started and as everybody else is joining. So today's webinar is on Discover Your Strengths. So I would encourage you all, as you're joining, to introduce yourself. So tell us your name, your top strength. Hopefully you've completed your strengths profile. If you haven't yet, you'll get the opportunity to do it later. But just say hi in the chat, your name, your top strength, maybe where you're based, and what you're curious about for this session. And in fact, I will send you a little template in the chat that you can follow to introduce yourself. Okay, so these webinars are really great to get to know each other. They're a great networking opportunity. So do use it to say hi, introduce yourself, share your top strength, where you're based, and what you're curious about for this session. So today we'll be exploring our strengths. If you have completed the strengths profile, please make sure you have your strengths profile report with you. Again, if you haven't yet, that's okay. You'll have the opportunity to complete it later on. So today we'll be exploring your unique individual strengths profile, and that will help you gain a better understanding of your strengths and weaknesses. And that will help you to effectively leverage your strengths when you're in an interview, for applications, and in the workplace generally. So for this session, we'll have about 45 minutes of content information around strengths. We'll have a couple of polls, activities, exercises, and towards the end, we'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A. So any questions that you do have during, I might be able to answer them as we go. So I might answer your questions during the session, but please do pop them in the Q&A. You should see at the bottom of your screen. And I will have dedicated time at the end of the session to answer your questions. If you need captions, you have the option to add captions during this session as well. So I think I will get started. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't got your strengths profile with you, have a soft copy or a hard copy, whatever it may be, just have it next to you because we'll be exploring your strengths profile. And I can see a couple of people are sharing. Time Optimizer, Resilient Centered, thank you. Okay, great. So it looks like a lot of you have completed the strengths profile, which is good to see because I'm seeing you sharing your top strengths. Great. Okay, so let's move on. I'm going to start with a quick introduction on Cappfinity and me briefly before we dive into the session. So I'm Lucy Coudray. I've got a French name because I am from France, but I've always lived in the UK. And I've been at Cappfinity for over 2 years now. And Cappfinity is an organisation that focuses around talent development, talent management, talent assessment, acquisition, and talent mobility. And at the heart of the organisation, we look at strengths. We approach everything with strengths. Strengths is how we speak, what we talk about, and what we deliver with our clients as well. My background is learning and development. I design workshops, I facilitate workshops. I am a career coach as well. And most recently, I've been working in virtual reality and incorporating strengths and learning experiences in VR. And I have my top strengths on the screen as well: humor, authenticity, and growth. Those are my 3 top strengths, just sharing them with you because I also like to encourage you all to share them here. And so you get to know me a little bit, and I will refer to my strengths as we go through the session as well as I use examples and exercises. So, first, I wanted us to look at the big picture. So why are we spending time trying to understand ourselves better? Because surely we all know ourselves pretty well by now. So we have some research by Dr. Tasha Eurich that we use a lot. She's conducted this research over a number of years, and her research shows that 95% of people believe they are self-aware, but the real number is closer to ? That's the question that I'm asking you in the poll that I'm going to launch now. So you should see a poll here. It's anonymous. I'm just curious to see what you think the real answer is. Considering that 95% of people believe they are self-aware, what do you think the real number is? It's anonymous. I'm not testing anyone. I'm just curious to see which one you will choose. Okay, so we've got 150 responses. Let's get a few more. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. And I'm very happy to say that the 51% have chosen 15%, and 15% is correct. A couple of you 45% and a couple of you 65%. So I don't know if you were already familiar with this research, but for me, it certainly was a shock to see that, given that not just a little majority, but the vast majority of us, 95% of us, think we are self-aware, that actually only 15% are actually self-aware. And we talk a lot about self-awareness and how important self-awareness is in Cappfinity and in the workshops that we do. And we always use, we talk about Stephen Bartlett as well, that you might be familiar with, along with other leaders in the world of entrepreneurial, well, who are entrepreneurs who work in different industries, talk about how important self-awareness is. And that's probably the number one skill that is really worth spending a lot of time developing. Because once you develop your self-awareness, then you're able to develop other skills. So that's why we think it's really important to focus on self-awareness, and focusing on your strengths is part of that self-awareness. And not only is it important for you, but it will help you in the workplace. It will help you with your relationships with others. It will help you when you're interacting with others, making sure that you're creating a strong first impression and making an impact, whether it's interviews, applications, workplace relationships. When you know your strengths, you know what value you can add. So that's why strengths, why we think it's so important. I say we, Stephen Bartlett, I always use him as an example, but why we generally think self-awareness is important. So what are strengths? A lot of you might be familiar with strengths already. You might have explored strengths at university, in school. The way we define it at Cappfinity is a strength is something that you do well, you do often, and something that energizes us. So we look at performance, energy, and use. Performance effectively is how well you perform when using these strengths. Energy is how energized you are by using these strengths. And I'll talk about energy in a bit more detail, because that one's a key element when we talk about strengths. And then use is how often you use your strengths. So that's Cappfinity's unique definition of a strength: performance, energy, and use. And once you know what to look for, once you have these three elements in your mind, a strength is quite easy to spot. And we can learn to do this, to spot strengths, with a simple technique that's called strength spotting. And I will illustrate this with a couple of examples. So I will start off by sharing something that energizes me, and then something that drains me. And what I would like you to do is to observe me, watch what I'm doing, and listen to the words I'm using, to my tone, to the speed of my speech, and how my facial expressions, my hands, everything that I'm doing. So you can overanalyze what I'm doing and be ready to share that in the chat afterwards. And I'll tell you a bit more about why we're doing this exercise in particular. So I'm going to grab something that energizes me first. So this is something that energizes me. This is a plant. This is something that a colleague at Cappfinity actually gave me as a present for Christmas. And it was tiny when I first got it, and it's still small, but it's much bigger than it used to be. And I've chosen this because it represents so many things that I enjoy and I get energized by. Nature is something that I get energized by. I love going out for a walk. I typically go for a walk every single day, even if it's raining, even if it's cold. That's something that I always like to commit to, because I get creative, I get different ideas I just feel much more stimulated after being in nature. And I think something else that I really enjoy about plants or nature in general is the challenge associated with it. I love going for a run in the outdoors. I love running in the mountains. I love open water swimming. I love all of those things where nature challenges you to do something, or to for your body to be challenged physically as well. So that's something that energizes me personally. So I will now share something that drains me, and same thing, analyze, look at me, look at what my body language is saying, my words, my tone. So what drains me, although this is a very lovely color and I love this notebook because I just love the color, this represents writing, or writing reports, writing a proposal, writing a blog. I might really enjoy the topic. If I have to write a blog about coaching, strengths, virtual reality, I love it. I love the thinking process. But writing is something that I'm not good at. I don't like it. I find it pretty boring. When I had to do my dissertation at university, I found it really, really difficult to write because I write like I speak. So I can't write a succinct sentence. My sentences are 10 paragraphs. So writing is really something that I struggle with, that I don't like, that I wish I didn't have to do, and that always shows up on my to-do list because it's never done. Okay, so far I've shared two things, one thing that really energizes me and one thing that drains me. So in the chat, I would love for you all to share what you've noticed, body language, tone, words, for what I shared that was energizing. So you could use an E equal what you found energizing, and D, what you noticed when I was talking about something that drained me. So I can see some of you have already commented on that. Smiles, positive words, lots to say when speaking about nature, but negative words like boring, irritated look on face. Your voice is a bit flat talking about writing. Yes. You have to, okay, plant, E, lots of gestures, you look happy. Walks, had examples, yeah. Tone of voice, facial expressions, range of pitch. Yeah, great. Okay, so really, really good observations here. And words dragged. I did this exercise recently, and it was really, really interesting to see what people had observed from me, because they were bored listening to me talking about the writing and a bit confused about my facial expressions. Apparently I was looking everywhere, or I didn't have anything to say, and I didn't realize, I thought I was talking about writing and the fact that I didn't like it, but I didn't realize that I wasn't actually really engaging, or just struggling to find my words, because I really dislike it so much and it really drains me. So yeah, so great observations, hand gestures, facial expressions. Yep, great. Okay, so really good observations. And one thing as well, when you do this exercise, so I'd recommend that you do this exercise. Maybe you practice it with a family member, with a friend, with somebody on this call, to practice sharing what you're energized by and what you find draining. And I would love for you all to have a think about it now, what you find draining and what you find energizing, and to pop it in the chat as well. And see how it makes you feel. I know that when I was talking about the plants, I was already projecting, oh, there's this triathlon that I wanted to book. I'm also very competitive. That's one of my strengths, that I want to book for next year. And I was thinking about the walks that I could take at the weekend. Whereas the writing, I slumped. I felt like sitting down, actually. So yeah, so also notice how you feel when you think about what drains you and what energizes you. So do we have a couple of examples? Swimming energizes me. I find research energizing. Perfect. Boxing. Yep. Encouraging others, looking for the right words. Yeah. exercising. Okay, great. And what you'll notice as well, which is quite interesting, is that all of you will have different and sometimes contradictory. Somebody will love or find something really energizing, whereas somebody else will find it completely draining. And that's the beauty of strengths. We all have unique strengths. And especially in a team or in the workplace, I think some of the best teams are the people that have complementary strengths. So I'm not a fan of writing, but I have a couple of colleagues who I work with who are really good at writing, and we support each other in that way. So I think it's really great to have so many unique strengths. Completing activities, skateboarding, exams drain me, yep. Listening to music, energizing. Okay, great. Perfect. So keep a note of those. I know you've written them in the chat, but also keep a note of those for you as a reminder of what you find energizing and what drains you. And to just keep it in mind when you're doing an activity, are you struggling with that activity because it is something that drains you? Or are you really enjoying it? Are you volunteering for it because it's something that you really enjoy and you feel energized by? Okay, so this is a kind of a summary of what I was just mentioning in terms of strengths and weaknesses. So even if you haven't completed the strengths profile, you can already start to think about the things that energize you, what you're really passionate about, animated, that you can explain in a lot of detail, that you're quite relaxed about, that you'll volunteer to do. Those are most likely to be your strengths because you're energized by them. So those are attributes or characteristics of what make up a strength, or that you will showcase for your strengths. And with the weaknesses, it's the opposite. You have anxious, drained. I felt a bit anxious talking about the writing piece, thinking about, do I have blogs that I need to write soon? I felt a bit withdrawn, like I wanted to sit back down. I didn't feel authentic because I wasn't talking about something that I was really passionate about. Okay, so those are interesting characteristics to notice. And I'm talking about this for yourself, but strength spotting is a really useful tool to understand other people's strengths as well. So in the workplace, with your fellow peers, students, families, just train your brain a little bit to notice how they're speaking about something, how their body language is telling you something about whether they feel energized or drained about what they're telling you. When you speak to your friends, are they telling you, I had another day at work, I had to organize all these meetings, and what does that tell you? Does that tell you that being organized is a strength or a weakness, or is there something else behind it? So training your brain to strength spot is really useful for you to spot it for yourself and to raise your self-awareness, but also to understand other people's strengths and to notice them in others. Okay, so we talked about why strengths, what are strengths, and this is a bit more about why strengths. There has been a huge amount of research into the benefits of using strengths, positive psychology, and our research shows that using them can improve performance, happiness, and personal fulfillment. I think the main thing for me, and authenticity is one of my strengths, is that when you are true to yourself and when you use your strengths and showcase them, as a result, you are more authentic. And we talk about authenticity a lot nowadays, and I think sometimes it's a bit overused, but it's so important for us to feel like we can be authentic in an interview situation in the workplace. And as a result, this is something that you might already experience. When you are authentic, you're less stressed, you're resilient, you're happier, you're more able, you're more competent because you are using your strengths, and you're more engaged. A lot of our research shows that especially organizations that do focus on strengths have an improved performance in their organization, and they're more engaged, and their employees are more engaged and less stressed. It means they can balance work and personal life better. There's a focus on personal well-being as well. So it's a bit of a cycle here on this slide, but effectively focusing on strengths gives us all these benefits. And it is quite, I'll go through the profile in a second, but it is quite different than what we might be used to. When we talk about strengths, we say to focus on our strengths. We don't really focus on our weaknesses or want to spend time focusing on our weaknesses. Our focus is our strengths, and our weaknesses, we're aware of them, but we're not trying to fix them. And that's quite different to some of the stuff that we've been taught to do sometimes. And the benefits are clear. The research shows that actually focusing on our strengths is much better for us than focusing on our weaknesses. Okay, so exploring your strengths profile. So if you haven't already, grab your strengths profile. And we will start looking at the Cappfinity strengths model. So just before I start sharing the model itself, the strengths profile, for those of you who haven't completed it yet, it's an online assessment that's been taken by over 1 million people across the globe. And the strengths profile will give you some deeper insights into your individual strengths. And as I mentioned, it's been developed through research conducted here at Cappfinity, and we've partnered with organizations globally to assess, recruit, and develop talent using our strengths model. So if you had the opportunity to take one, you'll be familiar with this model, and I'll run through it in a bit more detail. If you haven't, do still take notes. It will be useful when you do complete it later to refer back to afterwards. Okay, so actually, before I share this, one other thing to bear in mind is that when you do complete the strengths profile, the benchmark is you've got 60 strengths. So the profile will look at 60 strengths overall and will categorize them based on 4 categories. It will be realized strengths, the one I just popped on the screen a second ago, unrealized strengths, learned behaviors, and weaknesses. And all of these will be categorized on your second page of your profile, which we'll look at in a second. And you'll have a whole list of all 60 strengths categorized on your the third page of your profile. So let's look at the quadrant in a bit more detail. So realized strengths. These are strengths that you use and enjoy. So you perform them well, you're good at it, you use them quite often, and they're energizing. So for me, for example, it's growth, humor, and authenticity. Those were 3 of my top strengths. And for this category, we typically say to use them wisely. Sometimes because they are your strengths, because they're energizing, because you use them often, because you're good at them, you might use them too much. For example, I know somebody who has organization or planner as a strength, and they plan every single thing. And they are amazing at planning. And for their job, it's perfect. They're really good at what they do because of that planner strength. So they really use it to its full extent in the workplace. But sometimes it can be a bit much when they're trying to plan things outside of work, and it has an impact on the rest of their friends when every little minute detail is planned. So just something to bear in mind, that we say use them wisely, use them when they serve you, when they work for you, when they help you, but don't overuse them. Then we have learned behaviors. So those are things that you've learned to do, so you're good at it, but you might not enjoy that much, or that you might find de-energizing. So these ones we say use them when you need to use them, because if they suck the energy out of you, there's no point in overusing them. For me, for example, it's organizing. You probably could have guessed by how I was talking about being organized just earlier. I'm very good at it because I had some project manager roles in the past, and I am pretty well organized at work or in my personal life, but I really don't like organizing myself or others. So every opportunity that I have, if I know somebody else who likes organizing things or who has organizer or planner as a strength, I will happily delegate. And I try and manage my energy like that, so I don't overuse it, and I only use it when I really need to. And sometimes you might need to be organized in the workplace, even though it's a learned behavior or maybe a weakness. You can leverage some other strengths that you have to help you with that, and you can pair them. accordingly. And I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a second. Your weaknesses. So weaknesses, they relate to activities that you perform poorly or that you find de-energizing. So as I mentioned, weaknesses, we acknowledge them, we accept them, but we don't try to fix them. We don't spend a lot of time, oh, I'm not good at that, I need to focus on that. And I can imagine some of you, when you completed your strengths profile, you went directly to the weaknesses and thought, what can I do to fix my weaknesses? I need to fix this. I need to solve that. I need to be better at that. Because that's sometimes our reflex. We'll go, oh, I need to improve. I need to improve. What can I do to improve? And the strengths-based approach is actually really focusing on your strengths and acknowledging your weaknesses, but not trying to fix them. And a question that I get asked a lot is, if your weakness is performance critical, how do you manage that? If one of my weaknesses is writer and I need to write blogs for what I do, how do you manage that if you don't like it, but you have to use it? For me, luckily, I don't have to write blogs all the time, but I do have relationship deepener as a strength. That means that I'm often in the office, collaborating with others in the office, building relationships with people in the team. So, and I'm good at strength spotting as well. So I can see if somebody really does enjoy writing and are really good at it, then I find somebody that can support me and I support them with what they might need. So that's the way that I use it to delegate something. But sometimes it's just about managing times in your diary. So when I was writing my dissertation, where I couldn't really get any help or delegate it, I used to block some time in the morning when I was more energized. Then after lunch, usually my energy goes down a little bit. So usually I would focus my time for writing in the morning. Another way to do it is to sandwich your time. So if you have something that's a bit draining, like writing, for me, I might do something really energizing. I might go for a walk, and then I'll have the writing, and then afterwards I might listen to music or have a conversation with someone. That's something that I find energizing. So yeah, you can sandwich that a little bit to help you manage your energy levels as well. Okay, then unrealized strengths. This is my favorite part of the strengths model, because effectively this is the untapped potential. So these are strengths, so things you're good at, things you're energized by, but you don't use them that often. Sometimes it's because you don't have the opportunity to yet, and sometimes you're not entirely sure whether it was a strength or not. But those are really, really exciting, because you can often create opportunities for you to use them more, and to effectively use and leverage your strengths in more situations. So I think this one's really exciting, and that's probably the quadrant to focus on the most and to see how you could use them more often. Okay. So your strengths report. So this is what it would look like. If you have completed it, you'll recognize this. These are just free screenshots from the profile. Your second page will look like that first page on the left-hand side with the quadrants. You will have 7 realized strengths and 7 unrealized strengths maximum. You might have a bit less, but maximum only 7. And then you'll have up to 4 learned behaviors and up to 3 weaknesses in that initial quadrant. It doesn't mean that those are your only strengths. There are 60 overall. So on the third page, you'll have a list of all your strengths categorized in realized strengths, unrealized strengths, learned behaviors, and weaknesses. You'll also have a bit more information and some coaching questions to support you. Some words or some strengths you might not be familiar with. I know that time optimizer, I wasn't too sure what that meant, or spotlight. So they have a definition and they'll explain what it means. And there are some tips and information on how to use them more often. One thing to bear in mind as well is that strengths do change. So you might have certain strengths now, they might change afterwards. What was really interesting was to see people's strengths before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and after the pandemic. Sometimes your strengths evolve when you have a family, when you have children, when you have a new promotion, a new job, or when you switch to a different industry, whatever it may be, your strengths evolve. So we recommend to take a strengths profile at least once a year or every 6 months to kind of see how your strengths evolve. So looking at the first page of your report, so that one with the quadrant, we're curious to find out what were your first impressions. So in the chat, I am going to post something, which you should be able to see, and tell me whether you thought your report was very accurate, that it was an accurate reflection of you, so put a number 1. If you think your report was mostly accurate, but there were some surprises, number 2. And if the results really surprised you and not accurate at all, number 3. Okay, so a couple of 2s so far. Okay, mostly 2s. I'd be also curious if anyone's happy to share what surprised you. If you thought it was mostly accurate, but some surprises, or if you have further comments to share or impressions from when you completed and when you looked at your report, please do share them in the chat as well. So far, no 3s, which is good to see, because typically people do think the strengths profile is an accurate reflection of themselves. Okay, so my unrealized strengths. I'm assuming that's what surprised you. Okay, good. Okay, great. Surprises, unrealized strengths, persuasion. Okay, great. So that's an interesting question as well to reflect on. If something did surprise you, to think about what was the reason for it surprising you, and also asking people around you. Would they have said that persuasion, for example, or something else would have been a strength of yours? How would they describe you if they were to describe your strengths? I think that's also a really interesting exercise to ask others what they think your strengths are. Okay, so let's look at a profile. So this is a profile from one of my colleagues. Or is it mine? No, it's not mine. It's from one of my colleagues. And here, just to give you an idea of what a coach might look at, or what they might notice from an example profile. Here, what I would notice would be that a lot of the strengths are in the thinking family. There are 5 families where the strengths are organized. So that's our approach to situations. So you've got innovation, creativity, time optimizer, resolver, which are more thinking strengths. There are a few in motivating, a few in relating. That's how we relate to others, relationship deepener, compassion. There are maybe less strengths in communicating. So I might ask that person a couple of questions in terms of how easy or comfortable they find or energized by activities that relate to communicating information, and how maybe some of their strengths that they do have could help them in some of their learned behaviors or weaknesses, strengths that they could use to compensate those. But ultimately, there's a great combination of strengths to support their learned behaviors and weaknesses. For example, you've got curiosity to support adventure, bounce back to support resilience. You've got creativity or relationship deepener maybe to support humor. So a great combination there that you can play around with and use to compensate for your learned behaviors and weaknesses. Okay, so to really understand and discover more about your strengths profile report, we do suggest to take some time to look through your report. And to help you do that, we've pulled together a couple of questions. So take a screenshot now of the questions or write them down. Even if you haven't completed the strengths profile yet, you could use them for later when you do complete it. Or you could replace the words. So which of your strengths are you most proud of? You might need a bit of time to reflect on your strengths, or ask others what strengths they notice in you. And then you can ask yourself those questions as well. I think the first 2 questions are great to reflect on. What strength are you most proud of? And when you really think about that, you come up with examples of why you're proud of that strength. What do you do related to that strength? And how do you use them? How often do they serve you in what you do? How you're using your real life strengths right now is really helpful to kind of analyze how much you're using them effectively in the work that you do. The learned behavior question and the weakness question is around compensating and combining with other strengths to help you manage that energy, which is really important. And then the unrealized strengths questions are around the untapped potential, the opportunities that you can create to dial them up. Okay. So hopefully you've all taken a screenshot of this. I'll give you 2 more seconds to take a screenshot if you want to use those questions. Okay, so as I mentioned, all strengths profile are all unique. We all have a unique strengths profile. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad in strengths. But what we do find interesting as we do our research and we analyze the data that comes through the strengths profile completions, that there are some commonalities in what does and what does not energize us. And sometimes it's quite comforting to see that there are commonalities. I know that when I saw work ethic in one of my learnt behaviors, I was a bit upset by the fact that I do feel like I am a hard worker and I do feel like I've got a good work ethic. And to see that actually it's one of the most common learnt behaviors across the globe, I felt a bit better that I'm not the only one, that I can still work hard, but I can use my other strengths to work hard. It doesn't have to be as a very directed work ethic, which for some people will energize them. For me, it's more the humor, the growth, the relationship deepener that energizes me. And the work ethic is a bit more, it's a bit harder for me to be consistent with because it drains me a little bit. So yeah, so this is just a snapshot of some of the most common unrealized strengths, realized strengths, weaknesses, and learned behaviors. I was surprised about the competitiveness. The adherence is one of the top weaknesses as well, which is interesting, our ability to follow rules or how energized we feel by following rules. I guess I wasn't too surprised by that one, but some of my colleagues have adherence as their top strength, and that's something that's really important to them, and that energizes them. So we are all unique and very different in our strengths. As I said, there's nothing right or wrong, good or bad. I think it's just interesting to kind of see and reflect on that as well. So before I move on to the last section and then go on to the Q&A, in the chat, I would, if you're interested, there's no obligation to do this, but if you write your name and your LinkedIn or your email, if you'd be happy to connect with someone to talk about your strengths profile, to set up a virtual coffee, for example, I guarantee you that that will be really, really helpful in raising your self-awareness, especially if you're talking to somebody that also has completed a strengths profile. So what I would recommend on doing is writing your name, LinkedIn or email, if you would like to connect with somebody on this call, and the person above you will commit to contacting you to setting up a virtual coffee. And if you do meet up, I would recommend looking at these questions. I'm popping them on the screen again, so that you can coach each other asking these questions. And it's mutually beneficial because you're getting insights by being able to talk about your strengths and reflect on your strengths, but you're also learning about somebody else. So when you ask them those questions, how do they react? What do you find out about them? It will help you with your strength spotting. It will help you in understanding people. And for interviews, applications, for the workplace in general, it's so important to be self-aware, but to understand other people as well. So just a reminder, name, LinkedIn or email if you'd like to connect with somebody on this call, and the person above you, above your name, commits to contacting you and setting up a virtual coffee. Okay. I see those people have shared their contact information. So do make sure that you commit to contacting that person. So the person above commits to contacting you and setting up a virtual coffee. Okay, so let's look at leveraging our strengths. This is the last section before the Q&A. So if you have any questions that pop up, do share them in the Q&A and we'll answer them soon. So once we have a deeper understanding of our strengths, we can start to observe and plan how we leverage our strengths every day. So, for example, we can leverage different strengths when setting goals, planning our development and progression, or when overcoming challenges, and particularly interviews and applications. So particularly the second question, is one of my favorite questions. Because one thing that is maybe hard to do is how to know how to communicate your strengths to other people in a way that feels authentic, especially when you're talking about your strengths in an interview. And one way that helps me and helps people in general is to ask ourselves these two questions. What is your strengths USP? USP, unique selling point. What is your strengths USP, or what would you like to be known for? The second question particularly resonates well with me. I really like this question because when I think about it, and at one point I did write it on a post-it note, I had 3 words on there in terms of what I want to be known for. One of them was to be trustworthy. I want people to think and know that they can trust me, that they can rely on me. I want them to know that I care. That's something that's really important to me, working with clients and customers. I want people to know that I care. And what strengths can I demonstrate, or can I communicate to show that I care, that I'm trustworthy? I've got listener, I've got empathy. Those are strengths that I can talk about, demonstrate and communicate in a setting like an interview or in a conversation with someone. So have a think about one strength from your maybe your realized strengths or your unrealized strengths that you would like to be known for, and pop it in the chat. Again, if you haven't completed your profile yet, that's okay. Just have a think about your strengths. What do you want to be known for? And when I think about the examples that I just shared, trustworthy, that's not necessarily a strength, but I know I have strengths associated. I have listener, empathy, relationship deepener that help me with being trustworthy. So have a think about what you want to be known for, share it in the chat, or what strength or unrealized strength you want to be known for. I like to be known for my humor as well. I think that I'm funny, or I like to think that I'm funny. My family and friends always laugh at the fact that I'm not funny, but ultimately they're laughing, so that's the win for me. But that's something that's important to me, that I want people to remember me for, or that I want to be known for. So let's see what you're sharing at the moment. Reliable. So great, reliable is a great one. And then think about the strengths related to that. What strengths do you have that make you reliable? Same with diligence, integrity, organized, resilient. Resilient and organized are strengths. What strengths do you have that will make you diligent, or that you'll be able to help you communicate that you are diligent? Logical, empathetic, problem solving. Great. Great, great, great. Outside the box thinker and wide influences. Exactly. So outside the box thinker, could you use your strength in creativity, in innovation? Wide influences, relationship deepener maybe. Strategic awareness. Great. Great. Okay. Great examples. So let me have a look at this next part. So here we have something that you might be familiar with, which is called the change curve. And the reason why we share this change curve, this is a model by Kubler-Ross. So this is something that we look at when we face challenges. It could be something related to a challenge that you had at university, at school, just in life generally. And to think back to that challenge when we were going through that cycle with the loss of confidence crisis, what got you from crisis to accepting and to exploring and to testing? And if you think about a challenge that you had maybe recently, or that you're having at the moment, when I have challenges and sometimes you feel a bit stuck, a good way to to get unstuck or to overcome them is to think back at something that happened in the past, a challenge, a similar challenge. It could be completely different, and to think about the strengths that you use then to help you overcome them today. If you have an interview tomorrow and you're a bit nervous about it, and you're not sure if you can go ahead with it because the nerves might get the better of you, think about something that you've done in the past where you had that same feeling of nervousness. What did you do? What strengths did you use to help you overcome that? I think it's a really powerful tool to think back at similar challenges to help you now, and to use your strengths, to think about what strength I used in the past, what can I use now? It helped me last time. And sometimes we tend to forget when we have challenges in the now, we think, oh, how am I going to overcome it? I don't have the tools to overcome it. But you think back at what you've had to go through, or a challenge that you had, and how you overcame it, and apply it to now. So it's a good way to think in the past about your strengths and to apply them to now. So as we wrap up, again, you can screenshot this. It's really helpful to think about these 3 statements. So what you're passionate about. I am at my best when I am with people. That's my personal one, because all of my strengths can come out: my humor, my relationship deepener, growth, listener, empathy. So for me, that would be how I would complete that sentence. I would recommend that you look at those 3 statements: the passion, the best, and the successful statement, and complete them. Have them near you before an interview, when you're preparing for an interview. Have those as a reminder. Look at your strengths profile, use that to inspire what you write in those statements as well. Okay, so I think we're nearing the end now, so we're going to move on to the Q&A. Oh no, I did have something else for you. I'm going to leave this on the screen whilst I look at the Q&A. This is a challenge, if you want it, of something you could do in the next 30 days. So the strength spotting that I mentioned, the reflection of your strengths profile, connecting with someone, peers, friends, somebody from this call, having a conversation about your strengths, and signing up to the next webinar on being your best self, where we'll have a few more examples of how you can leverage those strengths in an interview setting. Okay, so let's have a look at the Q&A. So if you haven't posed a question yet and you would like to, feel free to pop them in the Q&A. Okay, so there are questions around, what if I haven't done my strengths profile yet? When would someone be able to talk to you? So the first question, if you haven't done your strengths profile yet, the Prep Plus link that the 10,000 Interns Foundation team have shared with you, that's where you access the strengths profile. Not too sure about the second question. When would someone be able to talk to you? But the strengths profile, you can definitely complete it on the Prep Plus platform. Let's have a look at some of the other questions. How do I discover or know the strengths I possess? So by completing a strengths profile, for example, if you haven't already, or to do some strength spotting. So with yourself. So thinking about the things that energize you, what energizes you. If something like plants or books or nature or people, just kind of self-analyze to see how you feel when you are with people. For example, do you feel energized? I know that when I visit my friends, even though sometimes I'm a bit like, I don't know, I'm a bit tired, I don't know if I want to go to this networking event, but then when I come out of it, I feel so energized because I love being around people. I love networking. So that's something that energizes me. So have a think about what energizes you and what drains you, and that will be a good first step to identify what are your strengths. Okay. What are some key questions you recommend for those having strengths reflection discussions to get the most out of those discussions? So I would definitely recommend looking at those questions that that I shared a bit earlier. Where are they? These ones are really helpful to look at. I also think to get other people's perspectives. So it's one thing to self-analyze your strengths, but it's also really enriching and helps you with your self-awareness to ask questions about, what have you noticed about me? When have you noticed that I was really energized? Or so this would be somebody that knows you, of course. If it's somebody that doesn't know you, it could be asking questions around your unrealized strengths. How do you think I could use this unrealized strength of spotlight, for example, or strategic awareness? I would like to use it more. How could I, what opportunities are there that I could use them, and in what context? So those could be questions that you could ask. How do I present my strengths when I am looking to change my career path and seeking opportunities in an entirely new role? So great question, because your strengths, I think anyway, I've not seen your profile, but won't necessarily be for a specific role. So I know that my strengths, humor, growth, listener, relationship deepener, if I am in a sales role for a pharmaceutical, or if I am in a product role or a finance role for a bank, I can still transfer those skills. So I think it's, as long as you know your strengths and you are authentic, I think the best thing to do is to be authentic with your strengths. You don't want to necessarily change your strengths. If you're energized by something, then keep that and have that follow you wherever you go, whatever industry, whatever career path you choose. Your strengths might evolve if you discover something new and you realize, oh, I'm actually really energized by this, or something's happened, or whatever, a new job, a new event in your life, that might change. But I would definitely still stay true to your strengths. These are transferable elements that you can transfer from one career to another. My biggest strength is spotting my weaknesses. Well, I hope that with this session and with completing your strengths profile, you'll become more aware of your strengths as well, because it is so much more rewarding and empowering to focus on your strengths rather than your weaknesses. Okay, let's have a look at some other questions. What top strengths do law firms look out for, and what weaknesses would cause them to flag someone for rejection? So, great question. We do work with a lot of law firms as well for their assessment, for their development, and it's a question that's a bit interchangeable with other organizations or other industries, because typically when organizations recruit, they want to see you. They want to see the authentic you. So it doesn't really matter what top strengths you have, as long as they get to see you. They won't look at your strengths profile, your strengths or your weaknesses. And it will also be very different based on the role that you're doing. Some roles will require you, I'm trying to think of an example of where, I mean, if you have a writer role, if I were to apply for a role where in my job title there was writer, blog writer, for example, and I know that I don't like writing blogs and I find it really de-energizing, that might not be the best thing for me to go for. In a lot of roles, you have, in the role that I'm in at the moment, or if you're a project manager, whatever it may be, you have different things that you'll need to do. You'll have a combination of tasks. Sometimes they're people focused, sometimes they're spreadsheet focused. So you'll have a mix of things that you'll need to focus on. But effectively, I would say that organizations, you want to adapt. You might want to look at their websites and look at the values that they have and see how your strengths and your values match that and how you could communicate that. But they're not specifically looking for a set list of 5 strengths and would avoid X weaknesses. If you're self-aware and if you're authentic with your strengths, that's a massive plus in any interview for any organization. So should my strengths be a determining factor to choosing a career path? Not necessarily. They can be an indicator, I think. I think it depends what your strengths and weaknesses and it depends on what you studied, what you want to go into, what you're interested in, and it depends how you approach your career in some respects. I think it's an indicator to help you identify the type of role, not necessarily the industry, but the type of role that you might want to avoid or go for. Like the blog writer, I know that I don't like writing, so I would not apply for a blog writer role because I wouldn't be set up for success. I wouldn't enjoy it. I wouldn't do well as a result. And that will affect my confidence. And I want to go for something that I do enjoy and that I'm energized by. So I do think it is important when you do apply for jobs that you look out for something that you feel excited. When you look at the job description, you think, oh, this looks like something I could do that I feel excited about. Well, even if it might be a challenge, if you're excited by it and feel energized by it, then go for it. Let's have a look. A couple more minutes, sorry. And whilst I look at the other Q&A questions, I'm also going to share a poll with you, asking you what you thought about the webinar. So please, it's anonymous again, please do share your thoughts on the session whilst I continue answering a couple of questions. So, how can someone who has mostly been a people pleaser and never really expressed their true self be able to accurately answer the strengths profile questions? So also a great question. I think the important thing is that you are aware of that. And when you go into completing the strengths profile, continue to be aware of that and do your best to respond to it truthfully. Because it's not something that we look at or that we report on. So it's your profile. So effectively it's anonymous. We won't be looking or matching your name to it in any way. So I would recommend that when you complete it, you set maybe 20 minutes aside to really complete it properly and to think about you as a person, how you genuinely feel about the questions. The questions will be around how energized you feel for certain things. It will ask you questions around how well you think you perform in certain areas and how often you use them. So yes, I would recommend to be in a frame of mind where you can answer them honestly. Should my strength, so we've answered that one. Is it right to state one's weakness in an interview when asked? Yes. The one big mistake that I would recommend not doing is saying, yes, my weakness is that I'm a perfectionist. These are the types of responses that make interviewers cringe a little bit sometimes, maybe, because we know that it's a weakness that you're trying to disguise as that might be also something that's an attribute that's good. So I would be honest, again, be authentic, be truthful about your weakness. I am truthful about writer, that it's not something that I feel that I'm particularly good at, but I have tools to help me if when it's critical to the job I need to do, then I have tools that I've learnt and collected throughout the years that can help me to write well or effectively, or I build a support network around me to help me do that. So I think be honest about your weakness. I think it's much better to be honest than to lie, and then you come to your first day or your first week at work and the expectations are not matched. So definitely share it, but share something that, you know, I've learned because I've done a strengths profile and because I've explored my strengths, I know how to manage it. Okay. Remind me what your name is. So my name is Lucy Coudray. You should see it on my on Zoom, I think. Yep. And I'm the only Lucy Coudray on LinkedIn. So you should find me if you did want to connect. Let's have a look. There are some questions that I will leave for the rest of the team. One of them that I've answered already. What are the ideal weaknesses that you can mention during an interview? the ideal one is your weakness. Be honest and share that, you know, you've done a strengths profile, so you're aware of your strengths and how to manage your strengths and weaknesses. And when you do have a weakness that you do need to use in the workplace, you have tools to help you match some of your strengths to your weaknesses so you can perform. Okay, so it's 5 o'clock. We're going to wrap it up now. Thank you so much for your engagement and your time. And thank you for those who have completed the poll. We have about 143 responses. There are a few more on the call. So if you do have a couple of minutes to answer the poll, please do. It's really helpful for us to get your feedback, to know how it was, what you would like to see more of. Happy to hear more in the chat as well. And maybe see you for the next webinar, Be Your Best Self, in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. I'm gonna